Yo, for our nut talk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Frostside Chat, our weekly live-streamed post-session discussion where we talk about what happened during D&D. This is the chat for session 7-4, so if you've not watched that session yet, please go do that because there will be spoilers. I'm your DM, Eric. Joining me, we have Vol Robbins, player Chris.
Hello.
Edmonds, player Raymond.
Hello.
And this time we made some pretty good progress.
That's right.
Pretty good.
What happened when you split the party?
You know, I've said this before, but I secretly kind of like splitting the party. It is more work for the DM, but it often creates some just delicious scenarios and situations. It allows players to it's more focus on fewer player groups, so often those players can be more engaged.
Yeah. That to me is really the highlight. That's kind of the reason I kind of push that now whenever we come with these situations, because what tends to happen with a lot of these like room to room dungeon crawls I've noticed is that like one or two players end up being the stars of that room.
Yeah.
Right? Like Edmund was the star of the mimic room because he's the one who's getting waylaid by the mimic.
The star, yeah.
Yeah. And it can become easy for all five of us are just going into one room at a time.
Yeah.
For all the rest of us just sort of sit around while one person, investigates the room and then we leave. You know what I mean? But if we come across two rooms that we can pretty easily split, or we don't think we're gonna lose each other, like in these situations.
Especially
and
with
it's
this,
like, yeah, why not? Just let's just split.
I was gonna say, especially with this kind of dungeon where it's not like you're not like in an orc stronghold where you're gonna come up with rooms of guys or set up some kind of alarm bell where you like really need to be, together and all that. This is more of a just, hey, we're just exploring all these like random like just maze-like caves. As long as we don't get like too terribly separated and really go off in completely different directions, then we can kind of check out what are dead ends and what's the next step forward.
Yep.
Which I think particularly worked out in this session because you guys did run into a particularly winding route. But as you've discovered, you have made it through. And one thing I talked about doing in crafting is after this is said and done, especially during our big post-campaign chat, is revealing this map and then showing with a yellow line like the unique path you guys took through this very large dungeon.
Because from a DM's perspective, it all must seem very cohesive to you as a DM looking at the whole thing together. Because I mean, I've experienced this, but from a player's perspective, it is just nonsense because you can't see where you come around a corner and it branches off into two others, and then you come around a corner and that branches off into two others. You're immediately lost.
Yeah,
like it's I have no idea how to get anywhere. You know what I mean? Like without that what do you call it? Third person view.
It's tricky as a DM because you forget that a lot of times how the players you just assume things that the players don't know. It's like, oh well, obviously they need to get here because of that, but then I'm like, oh wait, they don't know they need to get here, so
they don't remember that they took two lefts,
or they don't remember, right?
Now that they're
and I try to be more cavalier with that kind of stuff too.
Yes.
Like I try to be pretty forthcoming about, and I even did kind of a recap about like why you're here, what have you done so far, just because it has been a while.
I appreciate
at this point.
that. Yeah, for sure.
Like you stopped early. Well, the problem is we just always start late, so the goal is always to try to end around midnight our time. The problem is we never start until almost 10 o'clock. Just because we're chatting and we're trying to get kids down and all that stuff, so it's just been an endemic problem at this point with trying to start anywhere close to on time. But yeah, I feel like later we keep starting like almost 10 o'clock, and then if we go to midnight, that only gives me 2 hours. Now it happened to work out in this time where it just worked. The timing worked out very nicely. We got to the end of a social scene. I want to do this kind of lead in from the social scene into a combat encounter, and that happened at this moment, so I was like, this is just a good stopping point. Unfortunately, I realized, I should have gone back to the other scene to deal with that, but then you don't know how long that would have gone, so
yeah, exactly. Who knows? Yeah,
we're in an awkward part where like half the party's about to start commenting, the other half is gonna do something else.
Talk to somebody, so that's fine. Yeah. Maybe.
So I'll try to manage.
I don't know what
you don't know what's going on, right? So I'll try to manage that as best I can. Which that's the tricky part about doing the split the party thing, is that the DM then has to remember, like, okay, I need to in my head try to figure out how long has it been that we've been focusing on this group, and then bounce back to the other group, try to find those natural downtimes. And I realize, like, okay, I need to switch back to the other party, but we're about to hit that point where I can trigger this fight, and then it's almost midnight. Like, it'd just be a good stopping point.
Yeah.
And I did thankfully remember to start the poll before all that, so we could
the
get
thing
that
I've
done.
realized on that stuff is that you can't do it like in game time. You have to do it real time.
Yeah.
All right. I've spent 5 minutes with them talking to this person. I need to now spend 5 minutes in the combat encounter, running initiative or whatever.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it just doesn't work. Because it's like it's like seconds in a combat, and
Right.
Well, you picked a good time to stop, because it's like in the TV series where you'll stop a scene, and then the next time you come back, they're like, "Let me show you something that happened in the past."
That's right.
At the same time, at the end of that scene. So now, next time we start, you can just go back to Chris and
That's
Bully.
true.
I mean, honestly, the way this session ended, it was like TV wise.
Yeah.
We were doing it like television episodes. It's a solid cliffhanger. It was like you can like cut back and forth between like, oh, things are rising out of the ground. The other party's like they're tripping into the ice towards the
digging through this mysterious person.
The creature, and then cut to black.
Next time,
the viewer knows combat's going to happen soon, but it's like, well, let me flash back to Valravn and Thumbleweed and show you what happened leading up to that combat.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the cold open of the next episode is us talking to the person that we are uncovering.
Yeah.
And then it hard cuts to combat.
Yep, I think that'll be the plan. And I didn't know that, obviously, going into the session. I know you guys are going to be splitting the party this much or all that. I did have a feeling you were going to take this route because you pretty much told me as much. And thankfully it did end up being a viable route, although it had some, challenges along the way.
Yeah, so can we back up?
Yeah, I was trying to segue into starting about the first thing. Yeah.
Because I don't remember what was the first thing we did. Wasn't the tentacles?
It was technically. I mean, you technically short rested first. We did some short resting. Okay. We did some healing and some identification, and then
it was a really long tunnel to get to the tentacle section.
Yeah, and then it took us a little bit long to reach that point, and then Frey just charged forward, and then as written, anybody who gets within a certain distance of this ice wall is targeted by a high level dominate monster spell.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was getting at as I was exploring this.
Yeah.
Which now that I'm talking about this is probably I was at the end of the actual play session. I actually was wondering, like, why did I get MVP? I don't feel like but I did kind of take.
You saved everybody from that. Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it, that's probably why.
Yeah.
But what I was getting at was like trying to okay, I feel like this is at some point I was like, I feel like this is a spell. I feel like this is no longer. I don't feel like this is an ability that some creature's using. I feel like this is a spell.
Even if it's an ability, I probably would have ruled it as certain spell-like effects. Just I like the ones you were hanging out there. Like, oh, can I get and I'm always of the flavor. If a player is expending a resource to try to solve a problem, then that should carry some weight to it. So I think by you casting like Dispel Magic first and then doing that Calm Emotions, I'm like, all right, this is
right.
And I kept trying to say, like, okay, you're on the right track. Like, you feel like this shit is working.
I mean, yeah, technically I spent a level 3 spell and a level 2 spell on that encounter, so yeah. But yeah, so that's an interesting one that I don't know if you can tell us yet. From a player perspective, it also felt like the new ethos in this dungeon of we're not going to fuck with this because it's not our goal.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if this was one of those encounters where that was literally the intention. Where like, no, you don't want to fuck with what's behind this ice wall. You want to just get out of here. Or if this is something that we could have just stayed and fucked around and found out.
You could have fucked around and found out. Yeah. So with the covenant that you guys obviously not going back towards that thing, you can, as written in the book, you can attack the wall, and if you do a certain amount of damage to the wall to where it like cracks the surface and whatever, the creature basically retreats.
Oh, interesting.
But you have to do a decent amount of damage to that wall, and meanwhile, it can just basically constantly try to cast that spell on everybody who gets anywhere near it, and it doesn't follow normal like concentration rules on only allowing like one person at a time. It's just affecting everybody that comes near it. So it's kind of a weird, it's more of a hazard than a combat encounter, but you can solve it with violence. Or you can solve it like
theoretically though.
Yeah.
Could everyone become dominated?
Yes.
What happens then?
Well, what happens is after an hour goes by, you have to make a intelligence save, and in the book it says if an hour goes by and they're still dominated, they have to make the intelligence save, and if they succeed, you take half damage. If you fail, you take all. It's a pretty sizable amount of psychic damage, and then you have to roll on the madness table. I kind of jazzed it up a little bit and added the ability for the dominated creatures to kind of attack other people. And I also ruled so that time when Raymond turned around and attacked you, I made him roll an intelligence save. Yeah. I think you succeeded the save. Had you failed the save, instead of attacking, you would have taken psychic damage. Because it would have been like that creature trying to pilot your body, but it's such an alien, like eldritch thing that it's like just hurts you. And instead you take the damage versus you being able to attack somebody else. I try to make it a little bit more flavorful and different stuff going on. Yeah. But essentially there is it can't like permanently lock the party because it only affects, I think, everybody once, and then if it does go through the whole hour, then you just take a massive amount of psychic damage and madness. Right. And so you can brute force your way through it by just walking through, and everybody makes a save or not. And if you really don't know what to do, then after a time that will just happen. Yeah. But by doing something else, you were able to kind of get him out of that. Although I still added the madness effect just as a fun little like, all right, now you got to make a save for just having this thing like crawl around in your brain. Right. But you avoided taking a massive amount of psychic damage.
But it is one of those things. It is one of those things though. I guess that like it doesn't have like a plot explanation. Like we just encountered some sort of elder entity in this dungeon that
it may have some purpose, but you're not sure why this thing is here.
Okay.
And I can't really say much more about that. But
I mean, yeah, exactly.
It's funny that you guys were more of just like, nope.
Yeah. I mean,
versus, this is interesting. Yeah.
It's kind of our new ethos in this dungeon is like, we just got to get the fuck out of here. Like, this dungeon's trying to kill us so bad.
Honestly, as a DM running what is probably the main like horror scary dungeon in this campaign, and to have you guys be of that mindset, I think is actually pretty satisfying for me.
And honestly, all it took is for you to like waste all our resources by like putting each like 3 or 4 different scary encounters in front of us.
Yeah. And this is our 6th session in this dungeon, and you guys just now basically found the exit out of it. Or some of you did, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with the way this one has been running, I think, in general.
Yeah. It's definitely it felt like a test. It definitely felt like a trial. I mean, I don't know if I've ever run or you've ever run a dungeon quite this size. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you have, but
do you count the entire Tomb of the Nine Gods section from Tomb of Annihilation? Because that is technically one giant dungeon with like 6 different floors.
That's true. That was
that was so. Yes, I've actually had run a mega dungeon before. That was the entire last like 1/4 of that.
It's true. Yep.
I have to see how many sessions it was, but it was a while. So that I don't think anything's ever gonna beat that. But this one has been a pretty good.
It's a pretty big one.
Yeah. Let's see, I can tell you, Tomb, the Nine Gods. We entered it in session 70. And we were basically there until the end of the campaign in session 86.
16 sessions.
Yeah.
That is a long-ass time. Okay, yeah. So that one...
But that one had multiple floors, and floors would have multiple themes and things going on, so it kind of breaks it up. It's not like you're exploring one big maze. When I think
back on that one, I don't think back on it as one big, like running sequence. I think back on it as almost like floors, I guess.
Which is why I think it's a really well-designed mega dungeon, because it does that. Yeah. And same thing with like Dungeon of the Mad Mage does that too, if you've seen parts of that one. But it's technically like a 20-floor, it's a 20-floor dungeon, but each one is like its own biome, its own story, its own flora and fauna, so it doesn't feel like it's all necessarily one big thing.
Yeah.
This one, however, you're right.
2 of the dungeons from War for the Lost Plane are from...
that's true. Yeah. This one, however, is like one big dungeon crawl, and it is... for example, the Grove right now is room 36. Now, obviously, you guys have not seen every room. You've skipped a lot of stuff. But I'm just telling you how big this area is.
Yeah,
That's a lot of room. It's a
big.
giant map. And you've probably seen the side. I mean, you can see the scroll bar. Like, it's just absolutely enormous.
Right. Yes. It's very big.
Yeah. And we'll at least be here for another session, but I think we might be able to wrap things up with this dungeon next time.
Nice.
I guess we skipped over the stuff in the middle. So yeah, I love the way you did suppress motions. I think that worked out well, and I just kind of ruled that like that's just going to solve the problem here.
The spell is written kind of weird out of combat. There's a lot of spells that like are intended for in combat or intended for out of combat. So if you try to use them in the other way, it's like, how does this work? It becomes awkward. But I appreciate you just sort of making a ruling and letting us roll with it.
It seemed like it would have been tedious to be like, all right, you cast it, that suppresses it, but then when you walk through, that could technically target you, which would then end the effect, just cause this whole domino effect. It's like, I'm just going to reward him for casting the spells and let it happen, because I've already gotten my fun off, so... it's different if like nobody affects it and then like, now I feel bad about it, but if people are already getting hit by it, I'm like, all right.
Yep.
Sylvan, I'm pretty sure this is bigger than Wave Echo Cave. It's got to be like twice as big, in fact. I mean, Wave Echo Cave is good size, but that only took us a couple sessions. Well, I guess this one's only going to take us a couple... But this one, I think Wave Echo Cave, you guys did most of that dungeon. This one, you guys literally only going to end up doing maybe 2/3 of.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see after the fact how much... What we skipped.
Yeah, this will be probably the most fun one to open up the dynamic lighting and just show everybody and see, because it is absolutely enormous. When I'm on my in fact, right now on my stream, so when I'm basically just not running it live, I zoom out to like 50 or 60%, so I can try to see more things.
Yeah.
So after that, we split the party. The mirrored cavern had another psychic haunting in it, which... what's funny is you guys end up the psychic hauntings I thought would be a bigger deal throughout this dungeon. Like, I wanted to emulate the dungeon used for the Lost Plane, which is like every time somebody casts a spell, like something bad could happen.
Oh yeah.
So it's like every couple rooms you have this like scary thing happen that people have to make saves for.
Yeah.
But I think A, people are making the saves a lot, and then B, the effect doesn't end up happening too bad. I guess Thimbleweed got struck by disadvantage. And then Edmund did get hit by one, but it was a frightened effect, which got suppressed by your calm emotions, which was pretty funny.
Yep.
Ross Charlton in one room, the spitting mimic. How did you feel about the mimic, Ray?
And
mimics are just classic bullshit D&D monsters. I feel like it is just such a bullshit thing, because they appear as treasure chests or like things that you're just like, all right, time to get some loot, and it's just wait, why is a monster here? Is it just sitting here like forever waiting for somebody to fuck with it? Like, it is such a bullshit thing.
It's a classic like kind of meta monster where it's like it has to know that like adventurers are going to come along. Just by its very nature, it has to know that just to exist.
It's just chilling there for how long?
Did you put it there? Or
I did not. It's actually written in the book that there is a stone. It's straight. In fact, this whole session probably adhered closest to the book than most of my sessions are.
I can say in that case, I felt like it was kind of pointless. Like, here's a mimic, and you got to fight it.
It is. It's totally just a trap room. Yeah, it's like, oh, I think there's a thing here. I did love that you were like, oh, well, I'm gonna check it out, and I'll start, jacking with it. And it's supposed to be that way, because if you remember, and I made sure to remind you of the fact that there's an exact one of these that gives you a benefit.
Yep.
Earlier in the dungeon. So I think in the book it is kind of clever that they're like, they just don't put a random thing here. It's like, oh, maybe the mimic saw that and was like, all right, now I can try to pretend to be this and lure people in there. And of course the players are going to be like,
intelligence on the mimic's part.
It is, but the player be like, all right, well, let's see what this one does, and then you end up.
So it works out that I'm the exact same person who activated the previous time.
That's right.
It is. That worked out really well.
Kind of coincidental. Yeah.
And yes, Nick, I did buff the mimic a bit. Because otherwise, you're never going to see it spit its acid, because it has to do that instead of everything else. Now, the spit acid is on a recharge, so I wouldn't be able to do that every single round. But yeah, I just added that as part of its multi-attack, because there's a...
curious. Well, sorry, I'll let you finish.
No, that's all I was going to say. Normally, it has to choose between doing its big multi-attack or its spit acid. And I'm like, well, it's never going to spit its acid if it's got somebody grappled, and I wanted to show off that ability, so...
Nice.
I was curious. this room is 15 feet high. I was wondering what you would rule me shooting 100-foot long laser into the ceiling. But
in terms of like different like things coming down at you or something,
like the ground or the ceiling just collapsing on top or something.
I could have done something like that. Yeah, I probably could have, but there's enough going on where it's like, it's just cool that you can kill it with that. So I figure lightning would maybe be the least, because it's just energy. I feel like it's different than doing like a concussive blast too.
Right.
True.
But yeah, I could definitely see a DM ruling like, well, all right, you do that, but then like you got to make a deck save to like dodge like collapsing ceiling or something.
And just so you know, I did proceed with the beam cannon. Kind of curious what would happen if like the ceiling collapsed on us.
Okay. If had I thought of, which I didn't think of that at the time, that's a good idea. Had I thought of that, I would have just said, okay, now you got to roll like a deck save to avoid some damage coming at you. But frankly, you had taken enough damage, and I just thought that was a cool move with you, like, fuck it, I'm getting out of it this way. Just firing my laser cannon. But it was legit. I didn't actually cheat on the hit points at all. I did roll that thing for hit points, and I think I got above average. I don't remember how much it had exactly. Actually, no, I had below average. Sorry, it had about 80 hit points. And you guys did a pretty good amount of damage to it throughout the round. And then by the time it was your turn, it had about 22 hit points left. So you dealt just about enough damage to kill it. Nice. Now it had just gone, so I mean, it probably would have died before it hit you again anyway, because you had the whole rest of the party to go. But it was badass to do that. But yeah, just a freaking trap. And then I can't talk too much about the other stuff because we're still kind of in the middle of it.
Well, the mirror thing, were you just like, the night's getting low, so I'm gonna just skip it? But I felt like the first three of us who walked in there had to do it, and the rest of us didn't.
Yeah, that was
okay. We're just kind
of. That's a hard thing to rule. Is hey, this event happens when people enter. But I don't know. I feel like the psychic hauntings. It just felt weird to have everybody go through it again when you go through that room again. I feel like that should be like a first time you enter that room, this thing happens. Unlike the thing in the ice, which is a entity doing that, like the mimic, which is an entity. This is just a supernatural effect of just you being freaked out by these caves. So I'm kind of ruling it that like the first time whatever group of people enter that room that I've marked as a psychic haunting, they will experience that thing.
So it's almost like a triggered trap at that point. After it's triggered.
Right, yeah. And so it's not necessarily like, hey, everybody, and because it gives a little bit of a freak out about, he's splitting the party. Well, that means we're going to have to trigger these, and maybe, the other people don't have to do that. So that's how I always ruled it in my head, is that this isn't like, This wasn't like the thing in the ice where it's something everybody has to deal with crossing into. It's like a one-time just freak out thing, and almost more horror movie that way too. Like you're freaked out, and then everybody else comes through like, wait, we didn't see anything. Like what's going on here?
Right.
So I feel like that's kind of more themed about what I was trying to do.
Technically, the void's still experiencing.
Still freaked out by it. Yeah, I don't know how we'll remember that, but
right.
Something down.
Put a little token on him.
Yeah. Ability cheeks. And yeah, then splitting the party again, which was fine. I'm always a favor of that. It got a little complicated because there's some complicated stuff coming up with these two rooms.
Right.
And I think you guys were still discovering what's going on in that one, and then the other one. So the other one, if you noticed, neither Edmund or Frey could speak the language, but Valen has comprehend languages, so I had to pull a DM fiat move and say, well, I'm definitely not going to have a fucking conversation between an NPC and the thing and just try to create this like 3-person telephone thing. So instead I'm just like, fuck it, she can just cast comprehend languages on you for some reason.
That's
because I need to involve a player.
NPCs don't. I mean, I don't know. Players or people in the chat may disagree with me, but I don't think NPCs necessarily need to be stuck to the spell list that players have. Like they can have spells that aren't on the player list that are just do other things.
Oh really? Yeah, you don't think that's bullshit that I would pull out some extra spells? Oh boy. I feel like a lot of players would be like, "What the fuck spell is that?"
If I'm making up abilities for monsters, I don't feel bad about making up spells for monsters.
Wow. All right.
And
Interesting take. I'll have to remember that. I think I would have to adhere to the rules more, but I kind of bent him twice. I kind of bent him a little bit on calm emotions, and I bent him on comprehend languages. But that was totally just me saying like, well, I definitely like can't have an NPC conversation, so I'm just gonna.
Right. I mean, it would have been just tedious to be like,
Yeah.
and now they're saying this.
Right.
Now they're saying that.
Yeah.
Now they're saying this.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, well, we're just gonna be able to cast this on you and just have a conversation that way.
Yep.
And technically, I don't even think that spell lets you actually communicate. I think it just lets you understand the language, which is also a dumb, because like 9 times out of 10, you need to be able to communicate back and forth.
Yeah.
I guess that's the tongue spell, but whatever.
It is, yeah. That's why I liked that staff that you gave as a magic item, because I already have a bard ability that lets me speak to everyone that can understand me. But I don't have an ability that lets me understand.
Oh, right. And that weirdly comprehend languages like fits perfectly for that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's the other half of it. Now I can use that bard ability to speak to someone, and I can use the staff I need to comprehend what they're actually saying.
And obviously you would have been perfect here, and don't take offense at this, you usually take over a lot of the social scenes. Right. And I thought it was nice that I could include, which is part of the benefit of splitting the party, I think, that we talked about.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like usually like 1 or 2 people will be like the stars of the encounter. So like that's exactly why we split the party. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we got to have Edmund do the little social scene here.
Yep.
Which I think was nice to be. Honestly, after I think we've had 3 full sessions of combat leading up to this one, because the last one was Frey and the Flame Skulls and the Remorazes. The one before that was Freydigo and the Wraith. And the one before that was the Room Full of Shadows, essentially.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think we've basically had like 3 full sessions of combat going into this session, where we did have some combat, which was nice, but it was a lot of exploration. And then at the end, we had some like social role-playing scenes. So this one finally felt a little bit more balanced, because we got to experience more rooms and make some more progress. Versus being slowed down by these gigantic fights. So I'm actually really glad you guys avoided as fun as it would be to fight another giant Remoraz boss fight. Like, we've had so much combat in here. I was ready to do some other stuff.
Yeah. Some exploration that isn't just giant fight.
Yeah. People in the chat were talking about the Alien RPG earlier. That does sound interesting.
Oh, yeah. That'd be fascinating. I'm not sure how that. I mean, I have to read the book, but I'm not sure how that would even work. Like,
because that's its own straight up like RPG system, I believe.
Right.
But that is cool. Yeah, we're generally pretty big fans of that IP.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then and we ended with it was always my intention to tease like this other danger.
Yeah, so I guess what we learned at the end of this session, which I'm not sure we knew ahead of time, is that these holes are made by creatures? Because we saw creatures like forming the holes, I guess, or coming out of the holes, I suppose. I don't know.
I think the tease you're supposed to know by now is the Remorazes are making these holes. They're creating a lot of these tunnels and boreholes and things.
Oh, okay. So what's coming out of the holes? That you said like one-eyed something?
Yes. You would recognize, metagaming wise, you would recognize this creature if you were on the map and seeing them.
Okay.
But just bestial, one-eyed creatures that loped out of just one of the tunnels. So.
Okay.
And they're now attacking half your party.
Yeah. More, I don't know if these are Ents or just awakened trees or what, but yeah. Or one of them, I suppose, is.
Well, I did describe an actual like dryad type figure emerging, and so that she was.
Oh, right, you did. You described like a female figure. Yes.
Yeah. And she just mentioned the trees were her children and stuff.
Yeah.
And Raymond, you did add that fruit to your inventory, right?
Nope.
Yeah, because those all give effects. I'm really upset about why that freaking macro didn't work. That's ultimately really failed me on that one. I was so flustered at the end, thinking like, I thought I could fix this easily, and
it was an existing macro.
It was an existing a macro, and when I tested it earlier, it worked fine for me.
Oh, really?
And then when I tried to do it for you guys, it didn't work. And then when I just deleted like some stuff off it, like the whisper stuff, I broke mine. So
Okay.
I'm still not quite sure why I have to rebuild it. But the rollable table's still there. It's just that the macro is supposed to roll the table and make it look nicer.
Yeah.
So I might have to look at trying to fix that. But yeah, that's what it's like. I guess it's the first one I've used from the campaign that I did not build myself. Because I've used a lot. Taking advantage of a bunch of macros, tables and stuff to roll on. They've been fun. Yeah, you guys have been pretty depleted. It was really difficult because when we're looking at this dungeon, I'm thinking, gosh, if they do the entire dungeon, we're going to have to let them long rest at some point. But now I think we've got it actually paced really well, where maybe we can long rest kind of after doing this dungeon.
Interesting.
Because you have made a certain path through it and avoided some of the biggest, most dangerous battles in here.
Okay, interesting.
That maybe we can actually do it on a single adventuring day.
That is kind of a interesting rhythm that we've gotten with like the players and DM, where like we kind of just trust the DM. If the DM tells us like no, we're not gonna do a long rest right now, we're like, all right, he's not that means he's not gonna throw a whole other dungeon at us before we get to long rest. That means that we're like,
that's certainly not my intention.
The amount of resources we have now are adequate to get us out of this place.
I am trying to be hyper aware at that. At the same time, it feels good when the players, to me, I think I actually mentioned this crafting stream, to me it feels good when the players short rest and they're like, okay, now I'm like out of hit dice. Like I'm really running out of steam and I'm getting to the end. And to me, that feels like, all right, that's a good adventuring day to me. They don't all have to do that.
That does feel good. However, I will say that mechanically, the only thing that's going against that is that mechanically the game says you only get half your hit dice back on a long rest.
That's true. I never liked that, honestly.
Kind of weird.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is it also means if you're just doing one long rest between two big dungeons, your second dungeon has to be shorter because you have half as many hit dice.
If you spend them all, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That is a weird effect that I feel like, yeah. I never liked that. I feel like long rest should just put you back to 100%.
Right. I think you and I both thinking like most like video game rules. It's like, all right, we passed this level. The level's over.
Give me the save point. Let me use the tent, and then I'm fully replenished. Yeah, I don't know why that case. That's the half hit dice thing is very strange.
But in general, I see what you're talking about. Where it's like, you're kind of you as a DM are gauging like, okay, here's where they're at resource wise.
And importantly, I think that helps balance out short rest abilities versus long rest abilities. So classes like monks and warlocks, fighters to an extent, people that get things back on a short rest feel like they're able to keep up more. If you're going through those short rests and having that longer adventuring day, because if you long rest too much, then those short rest classes are going to fall way behind.
Yeah.
Because all the long rest classes just get all their shit back, so suddenly they're acting like a short rest class. So it's a tricky line because you can't always make that happen. But certainly in these big mega dungeons, even though you have tiny hut, I do try to say, hey, there's still dangerous things out there, and being in a one spot for 8 hours could have those dangerous things setting up all kinds of terrible things, and bad stuff could happen. Whereas a short rest, I typically almost never fuck with players in a dungeon with a short rest, because I think that's what a short rest is for. I think it's for if we're in a dangerous area, we can hunker down, we can recuperate, and I won't fuck with you. But if you try to long rest somewhere, that's going to be a different story.
Yeah.
With the caveat that I know some, like even this dungeon, like some areas, you just have to be able to long rest somewhere. Like that Tomb of the Nine Gods, like it was such a big dungeon, you had to long rest like 2 or 3 times throughout that dungeon.
Yeah.
In some capacity. Anything else about session 74?
This dungeon has been a trial, and I liked it, but I will be happy to have it in the rearview mirror.
Yeah. I think it
has been just a series of terrible things trying to kill us.
Yep. That's pretty much been the goal of this from the outset, and it's interesting that I actually, funny enough, haven't really had to scale it up that much from the original, which means this would have been really deadly.
Wow.
Or whatever would have been level 8 players or something.
Well, you haven't had to scale it up, but you also, the original campaign
does not
can't have one of the 5 players turn into a super powerful enemy and try to kill the other 4.
That is very true. That's probably the biggest change.
That is a huge fucking swing.
It was a huge fucking. It ended up being a huge fucking swing because when it, the first started, I was like, I don't know if you guys can CC her and make it not a big deal, but it did end up being a big deal. I agree. That was certainly painful for you guys. Yeah, she got to
honestly, it ended up become a huge deal because Heather's very good at PvP bet. Like she's like, I know your weaknesses. I know what to do to fuck you over, and I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
And she started that fight out with fearing us all, so that none of us could do anything.
To the point where as a DM, I would be like backing off and trying to attack other people. She's like, no, I'm trying to get.
She's like, no, I'm going for the
murders. Yeah, I was like, damn.
Yeah, us starting that one fight like all frightened was just awful.
That was bad.
It was real bad.
Do I need to add that to like a memorable moment in our? Because I'm trying to keep track of the memorable moments in our campaign. But is the whole fight against Freydigo with the flame and just
the memorable moment is like her step. It's like the end of the session before the fight.
Yeah,
but her stepping out as
like 2 sessions ago
and fucking fearing everybody.
Yeah.
And then, now you fight Freydigo and a fucking cannibal ghost that is materialized next to you. Like, that's like, oh, shit.
Hell of a start to a fight, yeah.
Yep.
All right. I'll probably add that to our memorable moments. I think that will do it for this week's Frostside chat. Thank you to Chris and Raymond for joining me. Thank you to all the wonderful fans for watching, except Sylvan, because he's a Niners fan. And we'll see you all next week. Go Cowboys!
Later, folks.